everyone. Welcome to the Grafton Select Board Workshop for July 13th, 2021 at 7 p.m. I call the meeting to order. First order of business, I'd like us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight we have a number of discussion items for the board. Some of these are pretty routine and just scheduling purposes, but one of them I wanted to bring back to us was a request by Mr. Mead to talk and invite some of our elected representatives to discuss the Proposition 2.5 and about the state's limitation on how much communities can raise taxes on. Some of you had called me and wanted to discuss this a little bit further. But I would like to just say, I'll go first, is that part of, I think when you brought this up, Ray, a few weeks ago, the more I thought about it, I'm saying to myself that unless we have some sort of actionable plan or something that we want to put in front of the state legislator, I'm really hesitant on inviting them in here. So I wanted to ask you and the rest of the board that, before we invite them in here, I would like to see what kind of structure that would look like, or what is it within the 2.5 structure that we would want to ask our state legislators to propose to the State House to potentially consider for change. To just bring them in here, I think to just have a general discussion without really a plan and then something to back it up, I kind of felt like we needed a little bit more, I needed a little bit more of a substance before I want to take that next step. So I don't know if you wanted to address that, Ray, or if I want to open up to the rest of the committee, but let's just be an informal discussion to just kind of lead us, down this road here and get to some committee. I said board. Sorry. Thanks. Have the board consider its next steps.
No, I think the reason I brought this up is because I have suggested this for the last 3 or 4 years to Representative Meridian and to Senator Moore. And the reason that I want them to come in here is so that we can find out what the process is. It's not to say, okay, we want Proposition 2.5 to change to Proposition 4.5. We want this. We want that. The process is going to be a long one, and it's gonna require us to recruit other cities and towns to help us. But I don't know what the process is. And I would rather have them here to explain what the process is so that they know what we're doing and we can move ahead on this thing. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll just say this. They are very hesitant in talking about this at all. They don't want to talk about this at all. And the reason they don't want to talk about this at all because it would kind of bring them into the loop of raising taxes on, in Boston's end of things. So I think it's very important that we start a discussion and find out what we need to do to get this off of square one in the legislature and in the Senate to move it forward. Again, it's going to take years. It really is, because down there they're going to drag their feet because hey, the way I look at it is, it's okay for the people in Boston to let the cities and towns raise taxes by overrides, but they don't want the responsibility of raising taxes. Neither do I. I don't want to raise taxes. But I don't want any more overrides because they cost us way more money than an increase in Proposition 2.5. If we went to 4.5, and I'm just throwing those numbers out, so I don't know, if we had a difference from our spending in our levy limit of $2 million, and we had that sitting there, we don't need to use it, one, but it's there. It's already voted. Everything's there. So, an override, which if we don't bring in some serious money in the next 5 years, we're going to have another one. Yep. And it's not pleasant at town meeting to propose an override that goes on forever and ever. So I really want to get this thing off of square one, and I really would like them in here to tell us how we need to do it. So it's not trying to propose anything, because I wouldn't, I haven't done enough research on it, and I will do it, but I haven't done enough research on it to whether we raise it to 4.5, or we raise it to 5, or we raise it to 3. I want to know the process, and then we can recruit other cities and towns to come with us, and maybe speed up the action. So.
Anyone else?
So for me, I think we need to know what it is before we even learn what the process is. The process is going to be draft a resolution, come up with a bill, they'll file it for us. They don't even have to, advocate for it. They're just a step in the process to getting it to the state. But what we need to know is, what are we advocating for? What are we going to reach out to other cities for? And what if it ends up being 8% or 12%? Does Grafton want to be known as the one that spearheaded to make that happen? I don't know.
Right.
And the reason overrides exist, it's that lever communities can pull when they need it. Not all communities might think Prop 2.5 isn't working. It might be working for them. It's certainly not working here, and I imagine other communities are struggling as well.
Yeah.
But I think we need to do a lot more homework before we even have to worry about what the process is, because we're not ready to do anything with that process, in my opinion.
Well, Proposition 2.5 does work for a lot of cities and towns. A lot of cities and towns that have high commercial industrial rates, and they don't need it. They can live within their means of Proposition 2.5.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that if again, I agree. Could it be 8%? Could it be 12%? Absolutely not. That's crazy.
But we don't know,
But
so
that's-
you can throw out crazy numbers,
No.
right?
Yeah,
you
can.
don't know.
You can, but I'm just saying that, what we need to do is start the process and get our legislators on board with the process. Then we'll take it from there. So we don't know whether we need to go 4.5 or 5.5 or 3.5 or 2 3/4. We have no idea at that point. That's going to take an enormous amount of work. But if we know what the process is to get it to that point, to get it down there and to get somebody to recognize it, that's what we need to do. It's going to take a lot of work on our part.
Yep. But they're both very responsive. I'm pretty sure if we shot an email or gave them a call, they would absolutely spell out the process for us. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be done in front of the board until we're a little more polished and understand what we're doing.
And we talked about this,
Yep.
Colleen, and I would rather have them here on camera.
Okay. But then the other thing brings me back to the local option income tax that the board was about ready to do a year and a half ago at this point. If we're looking to take on stuff, why wouldn't we try to also just usher in something that came really close to getting through once already? Go look back at that, revamp it, make sure that's still good, and then that's something to give them while they're here.
It's an option. I'm not ruling out anything.
Right. No, I know, but
Really not.
I think if we have two horses to bet on, there's one horse that stands both long shots, but stands a better chance would be the local option income tax, because then communities can decide that's for us. That's our answer, or that's not for us. It's 2.5's working. We don't need it. Versus revamping all of 2.5, it could take 2-3 decades to do, and I would put my bet on the local option income tax versus revamping 2.5 at this stage right now.
I want to do whatever we need to do to get rid of overrides.
I don't
And-
know if we will.
That's
And-
what I want.
Right, and it's going to be hard, but I think we have a responsibility to our community to look at all options. And I think, your option is great, and I agree that should be brought forward again. But I have to agree with Ray, and I don't know what the starting point is. And honestly, it's not necessarily our job at this point to know, because we haven't made a decision. We're just information gathering, and we can't gather information without asking the right questions. So I would rather see them come in so we can ask the right questions instead of having it be a back and forth via email. And we may determine as a board, nope, this is not what we want to do. But the fact that 2.5 is not working for Grafton, I would like to, I feel like we, again, owe it to our residents to look at all options and ask questions. And that would basically be, that's what I see you saying, Ray, is
Yeah.
that's what we would be doing.
Yeah, that's really, it's, as you said, it's fact finding,
Yeah.
it's finding out what do we have to do. I mean, they may come in and sit in front of us and say, you know what? It's never gonna fly in Boston.
But that's not the
It's not-
process. That's,
no,
we
no,
don't
I
care
know,
about
I
that.
know.
We just wanna know what the
We
process
just wanna
is,
know,
right?
yes.
We wanna know what the process is. They may say that, I have no idea, but we wanna know what the process
Mm-hmm.
is. That's really all, the only reason. And I, you know, I agree, you could send an email to them and you could get the process, but it works a lot better when they're sitting right there.
Yeah, and I like to ask questions.
Yeah.
I feel like it would just go a little smoother and we would all be on the same page and then we can, again, determine as a board, do we want to take another step forward or are we done? Like, do
Right.
we feel like this is going to work for Grafton or not?
Right.
And in the meantime, we also have this, you know, so, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in agreement of moving forward with the process.
Does it have to be a formal meeting or more of a workshop setting, since we're just kind of game planning and asking questions about a process?
I don't think there'd be any voting involved,
No,
right?
it's-
Right,
So
so
it
could
could
we
be a
get involved.
workshop.
So like an
Yeah.
informal workshop
Yeah.
would work.
Workshop would be
Totally.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, and I can check with the availability of both Senator Moore and Representative Meridian on their availability and give them an ample amount of time and a date that works. If Tuesdays don't work, maybe we hold just a meeting, you know, another workshop on another day of the week to accommodate their schedules as well.
absolutely.
Because very rarely do you see Senator Moore and Representative Meridian here on the same night. They usually have some other, you know, prior
Yep.
engagement. But I just
Yep.
want to say we'll work with them on that. But I do want to say for the record that as much as the 2.5 primer today is not adequate for Grafton, and to your point where it's adequate for other communities that have a higher ratio of commercial to residential, I will say that, you know, twice Grafton has asked itself, does it want to raise its taxes for these purposes to fund ongoing expenses for public safety, education, general government, and roads, you know, being a big one. And I would say that out of the 2 times that we've done it, it's worked. And if the community at the end of the day feels that there isn't a good compelling reason to raise the taxes, then, you know, I think the voters have a final say in that. I mean, it's only the select board
oh, absolutely.
can put, you know, a 2.5 override on the election ballot, where we don't need town meeting for that, only to approve a budget, right? So in fairness, I kind of think that the process works. That's already been prescribed, right? Whether or not is it adequate or enough for Grafton to sustain itself on not having to go back and ask the community for periodic overrides. Well, who's got a crystal ball, right? So to your point, if you raise it, let's say it got raised to 3.5%, Proposition 3.5%. What's to say in 5 years we're not saying, oh my God, that's still not enough just because of the way we're made up. And then
Okay.
what I fear is that you're right back to where we were, you know, prior to even going down this road.
Right, but you have to be, when, anytime you increase taxes or increase the, you know, a override or Proposition 2.5 to 3.5 or 4.5 or whatever, you know, you have to control your spending and live within your means. So that when Proposition 2.5 was originally put in, that's what it was put in for. The cities and towns needed to live within their means.
But there was
And-
way more aid coming in when
There
it
w-
first started.
Well,
40
on a
years ago.
percentage basis, yes, you're absolutely correct. There was more state aid coming in.
Right.
And
Um,
less mandates, too.
But,
So as the
yeah,
aid
unless
stripped away,
unfunded mandates
It's
is a
difficult to
killer,
live
you know?
within your means when you're losing support and told you
Right.
still have to fund these things.
So then you take the idea of Proposition 2.5 and you revamp it. And you change it.
Which is what the override is.
But the override costs more money.
Well, it's
So-
But you don't know how much the 2.5 will change, so you can't really say
No,
that
I have no
confidently.
idea. I have
Because
no
it could
idea.
be Proposition 12, you know, and then, oh God,
You
you
know,
want
the-
your name on that.
because the 2.5 override, to your point, you know, goes directly towards property taxes. That's where it gets its money from. There's no other component of
Funding
taxation
source.
that can fund anything more than that, right?
Right.
So to your point earlier, this resolution that we entertained, my God, over a year and almost 2 years ago.
March 2020.
This is a year and a half ago. This, you know, this could be something that you look at as opposed to just being property tax as the one true faith of local funding.
Yeah.
Right? And are there other options that communities can look at to, you know, raise revenue to fund as expenses where it's not on the back of solely on taxpayers,
Right.
property tax. That's what I want to say. So, all right. You know, I kind of feel that, you know, we just had one more shot at this to kind of see what was been on our minds now for a couple of weeks and looking at August, September timeframe workshop to see if we could invite them in here and we're going to talk about what is the process in going about changing this, but no decision has been made by this board
Oh, no.
or any consideration at
No,
that
absolutely
time.
not. And you know what, going back to what Colleen said, that if you look at this and you phase this out over 20 years and then you bring into account the new growth that we have potentially, okay, in the next 10 years, would we even need it? Would we even need that? But in the next 10 years, we could bring in all that new growth and we could do all of these things, and then 15 years down the road, you're back in the same spot because you've spent all that new growth money, and now you're back in the same spot, and you don't have new growth anymore. So Grafton is going to get to a point where the new growth is going to be, you know, $500,000 a year. And when we get to that point, there's gonna be a lot of big decisions made. Because you're not gonna have, you know, if we get UPS and we get, you know, some of this other stuff, and it brings in new growth in the next 10 years, that new growth money is gonna get spent. And it's gonna get spent on services, it's gonna get spent on all kinds of things. And then we're at a point where we're back to overrides.
Just so I make sure that no one's misquoting anyone, when you're saying, you know, $500,000 in new
I
growth,
just threw that
that's a
out there.
number,
I just
correct?
threw that
Yeah, so people don't think for 1 minute that we have any information in front of us that
Oh,
supports that.
no.
This is
no.
just for
workshop.
general,
We're spitballing.
this is workshop, this is very informal discussion, and then this is about hypotheticals, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good, yeah. All right.
I also just want to add one more thing too, which is even before process, I would like to know, are these conversations happening? For all we know, they're happening in other communities, maybe neighboring communities, and we don't know about
They
it
are
yet.
happening in other communities.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go. I'd like to hear about
Yeah.
that too.
Yep. Yep.
'Cause
Do
they
you
may-
know which communities?
No, only what I've read in the Globe.
Okay.
So,
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, thanks Ray and everyone else, Colleen, Doreen, for your commentary on that. So at least for, you know, Mr. Meridian, Mr. Moore, they've got a little bit more context. And I can refer to this meeting for them to kind of hear our thoughts on that.
Yeah,
All
great. And again, we can maybe be flexible on schedule to accommodate both of them together. That makes sense.
Yep. I'll coordinate that with Evan's office in their offices. All right. So next up, we have a townwide business resource guide. I know we've had a lot of discussion in preparation for some economic development policy changes, some charge on the committee, and looking at. We've been discussing this for on and off now for several months, but now that we're kind of at the point where we've got Ray, who's serving as our representative on there. I wanted to bring this back up before we talk about some of the other components, which is, you know, that are other EDC related components here. But I wanted to open this up to you, Doreen. I know that you've asked and often have talked about this, and just wanted to have an informal discussion, I think, before we start putting pen to paper on making some changes. So I would like to just hand it over to you.
Thank you. So, Ray, and I'm sure you're aware too, because you I'm sure watched the meeting. We had a discussion, I think it was a business meeting with EDC about changing their charge before town meeting. And we held off on that, on making any big decisions. But one of the conclusions that I came to was the current charge was made before we had an economic development coordinator. And it seems to me that there is a lot, if not all, of the items on the charge of EDC that are now done by staff. I wouldn't say all, but it would be helpful, I think, for both the board and EDC and for John Allen and you know, and you to, be able to determine, are there other things that maybe EDC could also be working on now that we have an actual position as a staff member and we still have this committee. So I did some digging of other communities just to find out what other economic development committees are doing. And one thing, I can't even remember the community I found this from, but there's a townwide business resource guide. If we have it, please let me know. It's nothing I could find, but I thought for Grafton, maybe putting together, this could be part of a charge for them to put together an electronic version of a townwide research guide. And that way, it would be a resource for all residents, but it would also be a resource for businesses, for collaborations, and just be able to put information up there and update it depending on what businesses are doing, what they want to highlight. Again, just kind of a place we could put it on the town website. I mean, that can be determined by the committee, but just a starting point to list all the businesses in Grafton on an electronic site to help particularly small businesses get recognized and get used so people shop locally. The second thing, I'm just going to go into this, Peter, if you don't mind, because these are sort of one and the same. The second item I put on here was small business meetings on a quarterly basis. And I know that John holds a lot of meetings, or did pre-COVID. And I'd like to know if this could be something to add to the EDC charge to help with maybe attendance, collaboration of local businesses, again, so they can use each other as resources and we can kind of help with EDC, sort of like guide more collaboration between local businesses. So again, these are also things that I saw when I was the rep for EDC, and now that you are Ray, you know, you'll probably have some more insight and input, but I think EDC was looking for us for a little more direction, and I think this board had determined before town meeting that because we have an economic development coordinator and because we have this charge that needs to be updated. I think it was originally brought because of the cannabis question too.
Yep.
And so now that that's behind us, I still want to do a deeper dive into this charge and update it. So those are my thoughts, and I'm open to feedback. And if I don't know how we want to continue this conversation, if we want to have a meeting with EDC again, if we want to bring the charge forward and discuss it as a board at a business meeting and vote on a new charge for them. We want to continue to table it, but these are just some ideas that I thought would be a good time during a summer workshop section to bring back.
Anybody have any comments?
So the last time EDC was in, did they offer any ideas or anything that they feel that they should be doing?
Not that I recall. John was really advocating on their behalf, and they're a great group. But like I said, it was hard for me to determine what was being done by the committee as a committee member and what was being done by John. And John is part-time, and he uses his time wisely from what I can see. And then when I look at the charge, I'm thinking, well, these are all these things that our economic development coordinator is doing, which opens up all the things that we have to do for economic development in this town. So, you know, these are two small items that, you know, and obviously we don't want to overwhelm a volunteer committee either, but there's definitely room to look at perhaps the charge, and maybe ask even Evan to look at the job description of John and see, are there things that should move back onto the committee, or are there things that John would rather be working on or is really good at that he doesn't have time for that could go back to the committee. So this is just opening up the discussion of ideas. To my knowledge of the last meeting, I think it was the board doing most of the discussion.
Because when I met with John, and, you know, we talked about a lot of stuff, and I said, so how often does EDC meet? And they said they only meet as required. So I get a little concerned about that we have this committee that only meets as required. And that John is taking on the role, not the role, but all of the work. And if you've got, 7 members on a committee, and there are other things that other people could do, I think that would, it would be better if if EDC met on a regular basis, and it could be, once a month or once every 2 months or whatever it is, to discuss and go over, because the meeting I had with John was great. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I gave him some ideas, but I think the committee needs to be involved, and take some of the pressure off of John to be doing all of this stuff. Like, he told me that he was working with some local businesses on their accounting practices and things like that. I'm not going to help with that. That's numbers is not my game, other than speaking them. But I think that if we have this 7-member committee, that we could, all get together and say, okay, what do we need to do? What do you want to do? Let's propose something to the Board of Selectmen. Let's do this. The small business meetings on a quarterly basis, I think that's fantastic. If we could get business people in town to go, meet somewhere or here or whatever, and talk about what they like, what they don't like, and it's all ideas.
And then we're getting feedback from businesses, right?
Yeah,
At
yeah.
this quarterly business meeting, this is what the small business community is, feels like needs to change, and then we know. So I feel like
Right.
it's a direct relevance to how we can, set policy or, talk to EDC or to John on our overall responsibilities. So, yeah. And again, I'm pretty sure John does this, or at least he did pre-COVID. But it's a lot for one person
It
who's
is.
part-time. And
It
I can
is.
say as an EDC member, I was never involved in any of that. I was invited to them because John set them up. So, yeah, I just think there's room for improvement. And again, here's two minor ideas that other communities do that we can add on. And however this board wants to move forward with the discussion, I'm
Yep.
open to it.
I also think that I would really like to see somebody from planning board also be on EDC. I'm looking at the mission statement, and
I thought
it's
there was somebody from planning board on.
I am
No, they're supposed to report to the planning board.
right, but I feel that if we have a select board rep on there, also a planning board rep on there, could have a lot more touch points, because
It'd be
if
helpful.
the goal and the mission of EDC is to promote, sustainable economic development, to assist the select board and the planning board in the implementation of the town's economic goals and objectives, planning is a huge part of that.
Yeah, it is.
And I feel that perhaps additional representation in the charge on that, and having a rep from planning, be an active participant, especially when, looking at properties and sites that could be of interest to EDC. More importantly, what are the town's economic goals and objectives? I don't see that listed right here on the front page, but maybe that's something that we could consider EDC to say, working with the town, what are they? Because again, one of the biggest things, and I said this when I was campaigning, was what are the measurable goals for EDC? How do you measure if what you're doing and what we're putting in there is successful? How do you define then what needs to be changed if something is or isn't working, right? If it's open to subjective points of view all the time, then I believe everything gets done kind of in a whimsical fashion. I'd like to see really good measurable goals and objectives that everyone can look back to and say, are we being effective? Do we need more resources to be applied to EDC? Does the charge need to reflect that? To your point, I would agree that, when the charge was originally written, it didn't have an EDC coordinator. It really fell on town administration and staff, the town planner, and basically whoever had some availability to go down and talk to a proposed business and see about getting it done, and getting them set up here in Grafton. But anyway, that's,
So I don't think a town-wide business resource is a small feat. I think it's a huge feat. I think it's a chamber of commerce sounding thing, and I don't think the town should be in the business of operating a chamber of commerce. I think that needs to be a private entity, and I think the EDC could work with the local businesses to help create one and then hand it over and say, run it, you guys do you. I know we're part of the Blackstone Chamber of Commerce, and I was looking at that today. There are 9 members from Grafton that are involved in that, and one of them's the EDC. So I don't think we're utilizing it to the best of its ability. And then I was looking at Hopkinton for an example because they have a very robust Chamber of Commerce, and they have 104 local Hopkinton-only businesses in their Chamber of Commerce. So it's an example of what it could be. And they do a lot in conjunction with the town, and they support the town, and they work with the town, but it's not run by the town. And I think that's really important to keep that separation. And by doing that, by creating a Chamber of Commerce, that will free up John Allen's time because he won't have to run around supporting the existing businesses. He'll have way more time to go find and drum up more business because the Chamber of Commerce will now be supporting the existing businesses. And I think that's something we should be charging the EDC with looking into and creating and as a measurable goal.
Okay, can I respond to that? I don't know how we're running this meeting. I'd have to ask.
Loosely.
If I can respond to Colleen.
Such a great point.
Unless you're going to say, yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm like, such a rule follower. I'm like, can I answer her? Anyway, so I see where you're going, and what that brings me to is then we have to really revamp the whole charge, because to me the EDC charge is we also work on retention of businesses, and so that's where the angle I'm coming in. So there are committees, town committees, that do things like this. If we determine as the board that we don't want our EDC to do that, that's fine. But right now the charge is written in the way my vision for EDC is very different than yours. It's we have an economic development coordinator who reports to the town administrator. Well, I want John and you to spend time working on new growth.
Right.
I want EDC to work on small business and the retention of small businesses. So, if my husband's hairdresser left and went out of town, and it's like, well, why? Like maybe an EDC member could be like, well, don't go. How can we help? Like stepping in, because a whole bunch of small businesses is also important to us. And it is like, sort of the, not only bringing in revenue, but also the charm of this community as well. So for me, I see both being an important role, and we just have to determine as a board where we draw the line with that, right?
So your vision is exactly like mine, where it frees up Evan and John's time to go find that new growth. EDC will now be able to work with the Chamber of Commerce, which already will be existing, to help support them, but not run it for them. I think the existing businesses need to support themselves without using taxpayers' money to do that. That's just how I view it, and I can see that it's successfully done in other towns. If you go look at Hopkinton's website later, part of they have committees on their Chamber of Commerce, and one of them is economic development. So they work very closely with the town, and I think that it's just a bigger vision and a goal that can be achieved and should be worked towards.
Yeah, so there's business owners on EDC. I'd love to hear their opinion on that, and they might be like, yeah, Colleen's right, that would
It's
be
a
great.
big goal. This isn't going to
yeah.
just happen.
No,
Yeah, it's
but-
it's a lofty goal.
But I think it's what we're learning also is it's a bigger discussion, and what we currently have in place isn't really addressing any of those things, right?
Many years ago, I was really involved with the, which used to be the Westboro, Southboro, Shrewsbury, Northboro Chamber of Commerce, which is now Quarter 9 495 Chamber of Commerce. And their economic development committee was actually in the Chamber of Commerce, which represented primarily those 4 communities.
Interesting.
When it broke off from being regionalized from Worcester, it really identified itself like we need to be like a more self-sustaining representation, because the business needs in that Metro West area are vastly different from that of Worcester. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for us to maybe as a town and a community to evaluate, is Blackstone truly representing what the future of Grafton needs to be moving forward? Or does something like Quarter 9 offer, that level of representation that we need? Because if there is, in Hopkinton, I'm familiar with that one too, you're right, they had their own economic development committee. It wasn't a town committee.
Nope.
And that opened them
This
up
is
to,
all
they had opened themselves up to a ton of grant opportunities. They could meet in a different structure where they were not, confined by, a government oversight either. So they can make changes to themselves, much more easily than saying, okay, God, we gotta go to the select board. It's like getting an act of Congress passed, because let's face it, you got 5 people here that got 5 different points of view, and trying to get a consensus can be sometimes challenging.
And the Chamber of Commerce in Hopkins does the events. They do a holiday stroll instead of Shop Grafton. They run that.
Yeah.
They did a restaurant week in May. And it seems to me that being part of other towns sounds great, but having Grafton's own identity and own businesses working together, I think is the stronger play.
There's 2 opportunities that Grafton has in the near future, that of the 8 Pine Street and the 27 Upton Road. 17 and 27, sorry. The former DPW site, okay? And the opportunities that's gonna present itself, economic development is going to be crucial in assisting businesses in moving into those locations, and to your point of representing Grafton. So I do think you're right. I think that, the charge needs to reflect the current state of affairs of Grafton and where it's going to be going. And maybe also examine, has Grafton outlived its usefulness on a town-run committee? Should it be its own entity? Should it be its own entity, and it reports to us whenever, or reports to the TA, or the planning board, or the town planner, when it says, hey, we've got this huge interest in people wanting to come here in Grafton, we like to talk about some zoning changes. How would we go about that? And that's how, it worked in the Quarter 9 one, which I've attended several of those meetings, like, my God, almost 20 plus years ago.
So I just need a little more clarification, and also for maybe the people at home. So Hopkinton has its own Chamber of Commerce.
Correct.
Okay, so so Grafton has always belonged to Blackstone,
Correct.
which includes 5 communities or 7? I can't remember.
Pull it up. It's more than that. There were several,
I'm
yeah.
not hooked to the internet right now, just to my
And
agenda.
but there aren't any Grafton businesses really partaking in it. I looked it up
Right.
today. There was 9. EDC was one of them. MJ's Market, which isn't even open, is another. So there's about like 7 true businesses where that's not a representation of Grafton.
Right.
Um,
So I like this idea.
yeah.
I do. Like forming our own Chamber of Commerce and having it separate from town government. I like that idea.
Yep. But I think there would be framework that needs to happen, and the current EDC could reach out to local chamber of commerce, figure out how they got it going, pull the local businesses together and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. This is what you need to do to make it happen. Good luck to you. Come back to us when you need support, because that's what we're going to be here for. But that's that, and that frees up time to work on new growth or find other avenues to bring in more business.
So what are our next steps?
Well,
Do we want to have EDC in, or?
I mean, I don't think Grafton has, in my opinion, enough critical mass to be its own Chamber of Commerce. It doesn't have the economic footprint like a Hopkinton.
I don't know. You'd be surprised. Take a look at the list. It's some of these are just you wouldn't even think
Small
about it.
businesses.
Yeah, they're
Very
all
small
very small businesses, but they make a very mighty chamber of commerce. I think it's worth investigating before written off for sure.
No, I'm just saying a lot of those organizations also are from other towns. These are not all from Hopkinton. They just participate and join Hopkinton's Chamber of Commerce, very much what Quarter 9 does. I mean, there's law firms from Dedham, Boston, that are part of the registry, is what I'm saying. But not all
But
of them. are registered.
majority of these are from Hopkinton.
Yeah. I'm just, I'm thinking that that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Okay, not a decision, but I just, that's how I feel. I think it needs to be, I think we need to, look, I know we've always been part of Blackstone, but is Blackstone doing it for us? I mean,
Does it represent Grafton as
In
far
the
as our
future.
business community? And again, maybe it's a conversation that if we feel Grafton isn't big enough to have its own Chamber of Commerce, would we partner with another community close by that is in a similar situation to us? So, yeah, again, my reason for having this on the agenda is just to push the conversation forward, and however we want to do that is fine by me. And it may end up being several more discussions before we land on the right answer. But I think, taking a deep dive into the charge, knowing that the charge was written before we had an economic development coordinator, and then also getting feedback from the current committee members, as well as Ray, who's a new representative. And so, I feel like it's a good time to get your input on it as well.
Well, I like this idea of having our own. I think that's great. You know, it's like, you know, the more people that you know, the more people that'll call you, and the more people that you know, the more people you can call.
Right.
And, you know, for example, there's three pieces of real estate and commercial pieces of real estate in North Grafton that are for sale. Just went up. Two of them just went up for sale last week. One's the old bike shop, which is a beautiful building.
Beautiful.
And the other one is the building next door. I had originally heard that those guys bought the bike building and were gonna move their office over there, and now they're all for sale. The church right next to where next to it, where the library is pending. That's somebody put a deposit on it. We have no idea what's going in there. So when things like that, if we had something like this, things like that would come up and say, hey, this piece of property is up for sale, we could call these guys, we could do this. For example, I'm working with a developer out of New York City. I'm trying to entice them to go to Press Wheel, Fisherville Mill. You don't know what Press Wheel is, so to go to Fisherville Mill to do a medical, you know, healthcare situation down there. And so far, they haven't said no.
Great.
So, but it's a long process. It's a long process. So, you know, it all really, you know, the contacts and who you know and things like that. And I think if we had our own Chamber of Commerce and we had all the businesses contributing to it and doing things and you know, I think, again, the more people you know, the further you reach.
Website.
So, as for the, you know, to your point, I think the number one thing is to really look at the current charge, right? I think everyone agrees that that's something we need to examine, especially with staff, because it was written before we had a dedicated staff member on there. More importantly, you know, going back and looking at, you know, how do we augment and develop that charge to better fit Grafton's current state of affairs in the future? I think is something that we're gonna need a lot of feedback on. I don't wanna be the select board that says this is the way it's gonna be. It would be great to hear from EDC and get their input. I also believe, hearing from Evan and, John, thank you, John Allen, to, see, you know, what experiences they can bring in to also consider, how to make those changes. So, all right.
I asked Evan to pull up the Hopkinton website. If you see at the top there, commercial properties available, all of these resources are right there so that John Allen can utilize Grafton's Chamber of Commerce to say, hey, look, here it is. And we would look so much more polished and put together where businesses are going to say, yeah, I want to come to this community. Look at them. They got their act together. They got everybody working together. I want to be a part of that. And here are my places I can go pick to go be a part of that. So this is what I was looking at a lot today, thinking, I want that here.
Well, but yeah, I mean, we've said this, but it offers additional support, right? So not only does it look good for developers, but it also offers our current staff, our current businesses, our boards and committees, our town, this resource. And I think that's
So even when
really
you move to town, checking this out, I think up at the top it says like membership, and you're gonna get that list of like over 100 businesses. I need a dentist. Okay, there's a couple here to pick from. Where do I go to eat? Here's a couple choices to pick from. Where did I see that? I think it was up top somewhere where it says membership, or Hopkinton Chamber businesses. Yep. So this is just a bunch, and I guess it depends on your membership level too, what you're gonna get on the website. Like you saw on the other list that has more
Yeah.
of them, but
this is similar to what I've seen towns do, and now I understand why you're saying that's a
big task.
Yeah, and especially keeping everything updated.
that's it. Thank you.
Well, worth considering.
All right.
Can I make a comment?
I love comments.
Okay.
You sure can.
I didn't say you could yet.
Oh,
Colleen did.
Say may I?
it's informal. I thought I could go for it.
I know. What happened to that?
A real formal, real quick in
I
here.
just thought I saw your heart skip too when I said that.
Yeah. No, I just think that the board should be cautious because the Chamber of Commerce is a private sector organization, and we are a public sector
Yep.
organization, and we have different outcomes that we want. And so you probably feel like we're having an either or conversation where it should be a this and conversation. And so, if you look at towns like, I had spent some time, Medway has a business resource guide. And their business resource guide is not listing all of the businesses, it's a page where you would go to see what resources are available from the public sector for you in the private sector. So they bridge that gap between private, public. You need accounting services, you need, I don't know, pick it. It's available there. And so the town does that side of it and then leans, I'm assuming, on a chamber of some form that is the business owners interacting with each other and creating a place that's business friendly. I don't know that they have to be, I don't know that they have to be too, like I said before, I don't think it's either or, mutually exclusive. There's the two words I was trying to string together. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I think that your John Allen's and your town are going to drive growth in a different direction than your Chamber of Commerce is going to drive that. I mean, we're driving things based upon, quite frankly, based upon tax revenue. That's what the town wants.
Yep.
That's its primary goal. I mean, yeah, jobs and tax revenue. And that's what we look at, where Chamber of Commerce is, it's just different. They're driving towards a different goal. And so I think, maybe it's not called Economic Development Committee, but I think there's probably still a role for local government in choosing its path of where the residents of Grafton would like to see it, as opposed to where the businesses of Grafton would like to see it. They might not end in the same spot. There's plenty of communities that choose to pay more in taxes and have more open space, right? And so we would look at that as an economic development question. Yeah, you have this huge field, you could put a 500,000 square foot facility in there, but then you would go to town meeting and you would pose that question and people would be able to choose whether they want that or they don't want it. Whereas I'm not thinking your Chamber of Commerce conversations are, they don't necessarily care about that.
Right.
Nor should they. That's not what their role is.
Yep.
So I think we need to frame it that way as well, as you have that conversation of, are we going to have aligned goals at the end of the day, and do we need both? And how much should the town be involved in setting up a private entity?
Right.
Is question two.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I don't think we should set it up, but if we already have contacts with local businesses, which we do,
Yep.
I think saying, here's the framework, go, do it.
Right.
And then that's it. We wipe our hands of it and they do it or they don't. It would be very beneficial if they did, but they got to figure it out. We
Right.
can't be part of it.
Understood.
That's my opinion.
Okay, so I do have a couple of takeaways here, just to kind of wrap this up, because this is, like I said, I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion as we develop and plan for the future. Come back with the charge to reflect staffing, and as opposed to having a townwide business resource guide, I do believe that there are other services that offer something similar, but if that's something that we want to bring back, if you have an idea, Doreen, or like a great example of something that you want to see Grafton implement, I think it's worth, continuing that exploration and going down that road. I just don't know if that's something we need to have a takeaway sooner rather than later, unless I'm mistaken.
If I could just interject one more thing, the resource guide as it sits, I'm not even going to wait anymore. You already said it was informal. That ship has sailed.
To me, not you, but okay.
So the resource guide that I was envisioning when that bullet point was put on the agenda is I think different than what you were talking about, and mine is again that public-private partnership. So I'm a mom and pop business and I'm having trouble with my accounting because I can't afford to hire an accountant. Who do I talk to? And there's resources at the state level that do that. And so I have already contacted John Allen and Will Blake to put something together like that is that on our website. That there'll be a landing page that is, call it a business resource guide or something else, but that's you can click on that and there's a list of different places with links and contacts and phone numbers of where you would go to do that.
Right.
To try to put us kind of
Another
there.
example would be like my septic's failing. I don't know how to do this. Who's certified in town to work on my septic? And then the Board of Health would say, contact, here's a list of people you can call and figure out who you want to do that.
Yes, we would not be doing
You
that.
wouldn't
though,
be doing
'cause
that.
that would be illegal, so we are not doing that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is
Yeah.
not
Well,
something
what-
we would
No,
do.
This is us, the town, referring you to a state agency that is designed, or a nonprofit agency. There are carve outs within state government that allows us, the town, to say, you should call the Economic Development Bureau or the Attorney General's office, or I don't know, pick. There's 100 acronyms that I don't know what they do, but we can put people to them.
In that situation, you can get a list of who's licensed.
Well, that's what I meant.
Who's
Just a list
licensed,
who's
that's it.
licensed. That's it.
Yeah,
Not telling
that's
you who to call, but here's a bunch of licensed people that can
Like
do
a
this.
Google list.
Well, they're
Yeah,
not
like
all
a-
going to be licensed in Grafton.
Right, right.
Right.
Okay.
That
But
was
we're not gonna do it
that
either
was
way.
similar to what I found, but these were bigger communities like Lexington and Arlington that probably vamped this idea into something a little bigger than that. But it's
Right.
but that's a starting point, and I think it's a good one.
I
But
think-
again, instead of having staff do it, I think it's something that perhaps, and again, it's just an example of maybe what the committee can do, since it doesn't seem like they're meeting very often because there's no agenda items, then.
No,
So I think as far as the resource guide, like I was just talking about, we can do that in very short order.
Okay.
Because we're going to steal that from somebody else.
Oh,
We're gonna
fair
put it up there and we're gonna tweak
change
it
the
to
name
graft
to
it.
protect the innocent.
Right, and it's gonna
Okay.
take us, half a day and we'll be done and we'll have something that's available.
Great.
And then as you folks continue your conversation about building that out,
Mm-hmm.
at least we've got this thing, cause as I researched today, there were some really cool ways to connect people and I thought we should have that anyways, regardless of how this conversation ends up.
Great.
Perfect.
Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else we need to bring back? I'm not sure we can be ready on the 20th for some of these items. If they can maybe bring them back
Oh, no.
late August
Yeah.
timeframe.
I don't think it's it's not a rush. I think taking the time for all of us to look at the charge is what I envision in more detail. Maybe Ray attend a meeting and speak to EDC members about it, maybe have a conversation with John about it. And then, giving people time to think about the direction that we all want this to lead and have a conversation about it.
So yeah, if you can maybe request a meeting and just kind of give the feedback and refer
Sure.
to this part of the meeting
Yep.
for them to watch, probably prior to they can kind of understand,
Mm-hmm.
what we're coming up. Maybe it generates more questions that you can bring back to us, and then we can, sort out a little bit more. Okay.
Great.
Great.
All right. All right. Next up, we have Select Board Handbook. I know this has been discussed, I think, over about a year ago. This is, I'm going to hand this over to Doreen.
Again?
Again.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is something that I don't remember when it died completely. I don't remember what happened with the
COVID happened. All right, so we got
COVID
that.
happened.
We'll blame
yeah,
COVID,
it's
but I
all-
don't think it was COVID.
Yeah, I feel like we were on a Zoom meeting, but it's all a blur now, right? So thinking about, I'm just trying to find a couple of things here. So this packet is a draft from Evan that he used in Munson. I don't know if to begin or if this is what they currently use.
Theirs has drifted
Okay.
from this.
Okay. So this is an original draft of a select board handbook. So as we know, MMA has a select board handbook for us, but a lot of cities and towns adopt their own. And what it does is it helps, as we are reviewing all the policies for the town, it's a good time for us to also think about policies and procedures within our board, especially with constant turnover, whether or not that happens in the next few years, it inevitably will happen. And for all of us, select board and staff, to be rowing in the same direction so that we can make sure that, policies and procedures are written, and we can write them as we choose. We can amend them as we choose. If something comes up a year from now that we say, oh, we didn't think about this. I like how Colleen does this for the meetings. Let's add that to the policy book. So this continues forward even if none of us are here in the future. So again, just a good time to bring this back. And I don't know if any of you reviewed what Evan was kind enough to put in the packet, but this is just like a blank slate. And I really like it because it doesn't seem daunting, overbearing. There's nothing in here to me that's not very generic in a handbook. So I appreciate that, and we can just kind of take it or toss it again or whatever we want to do. So I am in favor of having a select board handbook
Sure.
because I like following rules.
Rules are good. You love a rule.
You know, I think to your point too, these types of things aren't something that just set in stone either. You know, to your point, I want to
Oh, no.
emphasize that, as needs and demands change of this board, so can that document. But that's something that, not only this board, but future boards would have to be aware of, and beyond.
And they follow our charter, right? So this is where it gets, where we can adopt it as ours, because it will fit with all our charter, our bylaws, our decisions, our policies, and it will just continue to be an updated copy that when someone is elected to the board, we can say,
Yeah, read this.
here, read this. This is where we're at.
I think I reviewed it. I've got highlights all over it. And I think that all of us should look at it, and Matt's not here tonight, and bring this back to a meeting with our changes and our ideas on this thing, because I have a few. I thought that 90% of it was no issues at all, really. It's not, it's actually pretty good. I'm not sure about the fees thing, but that,
And there, so, if I could jump in, so this
Sure
is,
can.
this is, I told you, I'm done. So it's very informal. So and this is really just a jumping off point for you as a group. So this is a document that I had played around with. It's really an amalgamation of about 5 or 6 other communities' handbooks that I pulled together to make it something that I thought made sense. But I really just wanted to put it before you folks as a place to start. So there will be things in here like that fees section might not
Yeah, we
apply
don't-
to what you're
we don't
doing
need
at
that,
all,
yeah.
and then we just axe it. Just put a
Yeah.
line through, we get rid of it. Or, I don't really think this is how this should work, or this isn't how it works, or we have this other policy. There's going to be that conversation, but I thought at least it gave you a entry point to not start, trying to reinvent the
No,
wheel from.
I thought it was great. The role of the select board, I think is a good thing to have in there. Because as you get elected, a lot of people don't realize really what the role of the board is, and I think a lot of this stuff is really good. I like 90% of it, except for all the yellow. That's, it's not a big deal, but.
Right.
But we
there's not a
can
lot.
add on too. Like if we given the time too, we may think of more
Yeah,
things
no.
too. Yeah.
Again, I think we should review it. We should have our questions or our comments on these things and bring it back to a meeting and let's get changing and adopting. I think it's great.
Good.
All right, so moving forward with this, I know we've got several communities that we pulled exhibits from and so on and so forth. So I want to know, okay, how do we adopt? Like, what's the mechanism in adopting something for Grafton besides just changing the name?
Right. So I think to Ray's point, you would, if the board is okay with using this as its starting template, then you would just go through here, hack, add, do whatever you want. You can hand it back to staff, and we will make your edits until the point in which the board says, I think this is a good document, and then you just vote to adopt like any
That's it,
other
yeah.
policy. And I think you,
Yep.
if I had my druthers, this is policy 1 in your policy handbook.
Oh, nice.
you know, of everything. I think this is where you start. So when you're a new member, here's my template of where to work from, and then here's all the rest of the policies that we're in the process of.
We did this years ago for the school committee too, and it was helpful for new members to come on and read that and know, like, how do you deal with conflict resolution? I mean, do you have a right as a committee member to go right to a teacher?
No,
you don't.
right, right.
That's a no-no. So it at least offers some, you know, to your point, that guidance that I think is helpful. So yeah, so is William aware that he'll be in charge of all these edits that you're going to be giving to him?
Yeah,
He is now.
yeah, sure.
If he's watching.
He is not. He was ecstatic that there was no executive session. He was like, all right, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, but no, he's been working. We've been like the 4 policies that we were going to try to get to you by Thursday morning, so that they go in the packet, as well as there's another document that we're trying to get together. Oh, your policy on appointments for Thursday morning. That's our deadline to get those out to you, and they make it in the packet. So he's been working on that consistently, and so this will just fit right into what we're trying to accomplish.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Next up here, discussion on just traffic review concerns for potential solutions, Grafton Common, Worcester Street, North Grafton Village, and there were some other areas that we received correspondence from a resident, Billy Yeomans, as well. So anyone want to go first on this one as well? Doreen?
Yeah, this was me too. I had a lot of thoughts.
I just didn't want to mention. I just want to say Doreen again.
Yeah, again.
A lot of free time in California.
Doreen had a lot to think about when she was out west about what was
Yeah.
going on in Grafton. Anyway, so what's ironic about this is, you know, we just had this big conversation about economic development, and the other side of that is, you know, as we've grown as a community, there has been an increase of traffic. There have been concerns that have been brought up to me, concerns that I live through driving through town all the time. I want to thank Bill and Patricia of sending their correspondence in as well about 122 and Cross Street, and I think they said down to Milford Road. So there's just some areas in town that, again, great summer workshop conversation of can we do better, and who do we involve in order to make necessary changes if we want to. So I think you all know I live on North Street, and I'm just going to give one example. So I come out to the Common if I'm driving toward the Common, and I sit at that non-traffic light, and people are going up and down 140, okay? And the people going up and down 140, if you don't live in Grafton, you don't know what you're doing. Peter, you probably experience this a lot as well. And,
Not knowing what he's doing, is that?
yeah. Peter's one of the ones that, no, I'm just kidding. Doesn't know how to use our Common.
Present time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So people will stop because they'll see what looks like an intersection, but they have the right of way because it's a state highway pass through. And on the other side, if I'm going straight across to Millbury Street, so I'm passing by the Common on my left and the country store on my right, I'm looking in both directions on 140. Well, if there's someone in front of me, there's a crosswalk right there. Mm-hmm. So someone could stop because there's a lot of pedestrian traffic on the crosswalk. And then the person who has to stop is in the middle of 140 with speeding traffic. And to my knowledge, there's been a lot of close calls there, if not accidents. So I think to myself, wow, every time I drive through it, which is pretty much every day, can this be better? Because it's not good for pedestrians and it's not good for the traffic. Cross Street is another great example. We had a consulting firm a month or so ago talking about the North Grafton area around the train station. That's another heavy traffic area that every time I drive through it, how can we do better? Maybe we can't. But as traffic increases and there are these pockets of town, one thing I mentioned to Evan was maybe a first step is, do we collect data? Do we ask the police? How many accidents are there actually here? Do we ask the planning department? Are there potential designs that are cost money, so we don't have them on the table, but something that we can at least maybe apply for a grant for down the road, or it may just be simple things like making a one-way street somewhere, which I know, again, this is a workshop. We're not making any one-way street decisions tonight, because I know that was an issue with East Street a year ago.
East Street.
Yeah, but like Jordan's Boulevard off the Common is a good example that they made that a one-way street a few years ago. The select board decided to do that because of traffic patterns coming off of Worcester Street and coming around to North Street. Just made it cleaner. So this is an issue in Grafton. Traffic is an issue. And not to date myself, but I grew up in this town when there were no streetlights. And it could be as simple as, do we need to add more traffic signs? Do we
There
need,
was a street light at Hollywood Gardens long before you were born.
It was put in there in the late '70s.
Yeah.
And it became a blinking yellow light.
Brought it
Blinking
to
yellow.
Because they shut that
That was-
down
How,
in 2
what was the
seconds.
process with that?
I don't
Because
know.
we would
That was
want
the
to.
first traffic
we
light.
would want to look at that. We would want to look at that, yes.
Do you remember how many years ago that was?
No, but it wasn't too long ago because it's since Off the Common Antiques has been in business.
What was the question again?
Sorry,
When did,
we're-
so
I was talking to I'm sorry.
no, you guys weren't talking. You were just chit chatting over
No, we
nothing.
weren't chit-chatting.
It's very informal, Colleen.
yeah,
Well,
it's a good old
Very
days,
informal.
70s.
George, she's saying when that went to one way. When did that happen? What was the process? Because
Few
that's
years
what we're gonna want to repeat that process.
So a few years ago, because that was actually not that long ago, where Graves Engineering did a study, and what they figured out was that there was too much pavement for cars to go around, so people were speeding. So the whole redesign of the common in certain areas was to help slow traffic down. So when you're coming up the hill from Worcester Street coming into the Grafton Common, if you notice, it takes like little gentle turns instead of just a straight through, so people weren't doing like 40, 45 miles an hour through that intersection. It forced people to slow down, plus when they eliminated a lot of additional pavement around the common, so if a car was making a left-hand turn, people weren't automatically just going around them all the time. You had to stop and let the person in or out, and I've seen a lot more of that. I think your question though, so that happened, just to answer your question, 4 or 5 years ago, they did that work? So
Yeah, it wasn't long ago.
it was not long ago, but there's other areas in Grafton where I think a similar study should probably be done to assist with, to your point, traffic, and pedestrian traffic as a result.
And maybe this is something where we just say as a select board, we want this to be a focus during the master plan. When the town begins these phases of a comprehensive plan, the board is very interested, particularly in these areas and determining,
I like that.
how to
idea.
make it better. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to solve the problems. That's why I'm looking to like, who do we ask? Do we ask the police chief for data?
Can we get traffic safety committee involved?
Yeah, totally. And how do we just sort of like the Prop 2 and
What's the process?
Yeah, what is the process here? What do we do? I know there's a problem.
Is that gonna come back to bite me, Colleen?
It might. It might.
So I know there's a problem. I'd like to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
And again, I hear it. I want to also state a big concern of mine, and part of it is because I live on a street with an elementary school, but I am concerned just as much about all the other school buildings in town, of keeping our kids safe who walk and bike to school. And there was a big push a few years ago with Walk to School Wednesdays, and I see kids, warm and cold weather, walking up and down my street. And we have no sidewalk curb, and elementary school boys with backpacks pushing each other into the road because, they're kids, and my heart's in my throat. And I feel like, do we need bump outs? Do we need, at least, within a school zone? We really have to, in my opinion, start to add some more safety measures to that. And what
Yep.
does that look like?
Okay.
And maybe that's a discussion that we pass on to the school committee. I don't know. I just wanted to have the discussion.
Well, like I said, to the school departments, their jurisdiction kind of ends right at the end of their property, right?
Right,
So anything
right.
they have internally, like they have, they have a lot of, and they've done a lot over the years to mitigate traffic or improve. So I have to say that they've not been slack in that area.
No,
I
and they have
would-
sidewalks, they have crossing guards. I feel like, I'm not trying to throw it on the school committee in the sense that they're not doing their due diligence. They certainly are. I feel like we all have a responsibility, and particularly if we want our kids to be able to walk safely from point A to point B.
I was
wherever may
mentioning
be.
that they're
Yeah.
extremely receptive to listening and seeing, is there a better way of doing something? They just don't sit on their heels and just say,
Yeah.
it is what it is. They're pretty responsive, but I do think the traffic safety committee, I think, is a great place to really, start that, and then how does that feed into, to your point, I wasn't even thinking about I'm gonna say it, master plan.
Yes, I love that idea.
And that, how does that feed into the overall design of the town over the next 20 to 30 years?
Because as we get the economic development that we desperately need, we're going to continue to have a traffic problem. So again, I want to be part of the conversation now. You have anything you want to add, Evan?
No, I don't think so. I think you hit all the points that I would think of when I'm thinking about that, and I think traffic safety committee is a good tool to lean on. The only thing I would think about is, as you're exploring different complaints, conversations about specific areas of town, maybe lean on the police department to pull data for you, so that you can have a data-driven approach to, there's everybody has a perception of what they feel is. I see accidents there all the time, and then you look it up and there's one in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And there's another one that nobody's talking about where you have 10 in the last 2.
Exactly.
And so we just want to make sure that we're, maybe, if we're going to up channel things, that part of it is data driven, that we're make sure we're looking into that.
I agree.
All right. And honestly, I'd rather see that traffic, that's transiting Grafton, we be the destination. You know what I mean? That's something that, traffic is always not a bad thing from an economic development standpoint.
No.
But you don't want people
Safe traffic.
driving
You
through
want
Grafton to
safe
go
traffic,
someplace else.
yeah.
You want them to, Grafton be a destination, but, unless you've got the infrastructure to support, I don't know about you, but, I know in certain times in the spring on Saturday mornings, I avoid Worcester Street and go through Brigham Hill Road, and I go past Ray's house and honk my horn as loud as I
Quite
can.
fast, if I might say.
Yeah.
I don't drive
Hear that,
fast.
Chief Crapo? Super fast.
That's why my horn sounds so long. You have to hear it for 30 seconds and drive extra
Is
slow
that
by
what
your
it is?
house.
Start at the bridge? We call that Lower Brigham Hill, by the way.
That's me. Oh, yes. Okay. All right. So we'll start with the traffic safety committee, ping them, get some statistics from the police department, and then, as we discuss the master plan, looking at how do we feed that in there, and develop.
And maybe Chris McGoldrick's feedback too, because again, our planning director could be working on things or having things on the back burner that we don't know about. So at this point, it's just information gathering.
Okay.
And Chris does have a pretty keen eye or understanding of traffic flow, because he's brought that up a couple times at different meetings when we're talking about 8 Pine or whatever we're doing, and he does seem to have that. I mean, he's a planner. That's what he went to school for.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's got that mindset, but
I know from Quincy Corner down to Route 30.
Right.
I have no idea what you could possibly do there.
They've improved
No
that.
idea.
And I can tell you they've improved that over the years, right?
Well,
So,
with the
yeah.
with the traffic lights and things like that,
Yeah.
but the pole at the corner of Bridge Street in North Main gets taken down all the time. So that's I have no idea what you could do there.
Mm.
It's very difficult to pull a 53-foot truck around that thing.
Mhm.
Not hit anybody.
Okay. All right. Last but not least, a discussion of some dates to set with the senior center for early fall of 2021. I've got 2 dates in mind, and I wanted to run by the committee, either October 21st or October 28th. Those are 2 Thursdays.
No.
No.
They wanted to meet a couple weeks before town meeting, and town meeting's October 18th. So I was thinking the 6th or the 7th. The 6th is my birthday, no big deal. So I'd be really excited to spend the day with you guys, because I think that would be pretty fun. Just throwing that out there.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
We gotta
super
talk
serious.
about your definition of
That,
fun.
I know. I'm
gotta-
saying,
Colleen, you gotta get out more.
Yeah.
You really
do I though? I feel like I'm doing all right.
So October town meeting is, I'm sorry, let me get to the right month here. October 18th or the 11th?
18th.
18th. So how about October 7th?
If you want to crap on my dreams, then fine.
I don't want to,
No.
but I will not be in town or in. We are west.
On
I know
both those
Ray
days?
Ray is gone the
Okay.
following week.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that puts us sometime in the last week of September. That is early fall. Ish. Late summerish, early fallish. So is there a day like that, September 27th through the 1st, that works for anybody?
So they preferred Wednesday or Thursday. So we could stick to a Wednesday or Thursday. And they said a couple weeks before town meeting. So I would say stay in that 4 shot right there. 29, 30, 6 or 7. And that meets all of their tick marks.
29th to the 30th. Can you guys pencil that in?
Yes.
Yep.
We.
Now what am I going to do on my birthday?
I know, so sad.
Bring cake.
I was
Um,
going to bring pie. I do pie.
She does a really good apple pie.
So, town meeting will be October 18th. I'm just rereading this. I'm wondering if we also pick one of Barbara's dates in case the senior center is busy and we just tell her it's going to be after town meeting on the dates you gave us, but we are free on this day. Just so we're not going back and forth.
Say that again.
What are the dates that she said?
Oh, Thursdays are best town meeting. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm my apologies. I misread this. I thought that she had actually put dates down here as October 18th, but that's town meeting.
You know, the intent there is so that you folks can talk about what's happening at town meeting
Yep.
with the seniors.
Understood.
So-
Okay. So she didn't give us actual dates. She said any of that time was
Yeah,
great. Okay.
All right, so 29th, 30th.
Sounds good.
Ray, that good
Yep.
for you?
Yep.
Colleen,
I love it.
what day works better for you, Colleen?
I want to check the school calendar. And then can I get back to you? Just make sure it's not a half day either one of those days.
That's
I doubt it will be, but
Ooh. No. Yeah, good idea. Yep.
And I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I also asked for this on the agenda tonight because it was yet another thing. But just kind of bringing this back as something that I'd like to do every couple months. And now that the pandemic is hopefully over, that we can visit our seniors
Let's set it quarterly.
quarterly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I'll set it out for the next few months after that, and we'll set some dates with Barbara and their group, and they can publish that.
It's great. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I really enjoy the time with them and their questions and feedback, and I think it would be good to do.
Yeah, I agree. All right. If there isn't anything else, we won't be going to executive session. We will be on next Tuesday for the 20th. At the point in time, that's the next time we're meeting. We have no further discussion tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming out, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Clear motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.